Welcome to the Ageless Pursuit Project.
Okay, well, hey, welcome to the Ageless Pursuit Podcast. I'm super excited to have our normal panel, Cody Small, my co-host. I'm Greg Butler, and today we have a special guest, Connie Nightingale, a certified personal trainer, nutritional specialist, and some other really cool things. So with that being said, I'd love to start this episode by introducing you to our audience and giving you the floor to give a little backstory about who you are and your experience.
All right, I'm Connie Nightingale. I am a certified personal trainer and a certified nutrition specialist. I also have a corrective exercise license that I use on all the little old ladies and some younger people. On a personal level, I am a competitive powerlifter. I kind of do everything, actually. I used to ride bikes with Cody.
Still gotta get you out on a bike.
I'm dying to get out on a bike, but it's complicated to recover from powerlifting. And the funny thing is the powerlifting thing went from a little, I don't know, it was just an experiment, and then it turned into something big like national records and.
Yeah, what was the national record you got?
It was a bench press record. I think I still own it. I don't know.
What's the record?
Well, it was only 200 pounds. I bench almost 300 pounds now, but I haven't gone back and revisited that one.
That's like two of me.
Well, we could give that a try sometime. It might be funny. But anyway.
Hold on. There is like so much to unpack in this first 30 seconds here.
Yeah.
Okay, so back up. Like, this is awesome because I have so many questions in just your intro. So let's back up a little bit and start with the expertise and what you do for a profession. So you say you're a certified personal trainer, nutrition specialist, and all that. So what got you into that?
Actually, so I have a son that has pretty significant ADHD and bipolar diagnosis, and he had a lot of problems from a really young age. And we went with the standard Western medicine route. It was something we avoided for a long period of time, and then at one point I was like, I just can't do this anymore. At what point does it become more turmoil at home versus going on medications, right? And we had tried things like you hear, I mean, this was well over a decade ago. You hear like remove red dye and remove gluten and do all these. We did all these things and nothing really moved the needle. And then we tried the medication route, and it was interesting how that unraveled. It was like, oh, here, have this for ADHD. Oh, you're depressed now? Have some Prozac. Oh, and then pretty soon I had this 8-year-old child that just had severe issues in every direction. And I remember being at my wit's end, and I'm just like, what do I do with this? And I remember seeing this magazine, and there was a lady speaking at the time about neurodeflection and stuff like that. It was like a big thing, and I went to her thing, and my husband and we sat in the front row, and he's like, you want to go to this? And I was like, yes, because I want to see if there's another way I can help my child. And we went, and I was sitting in the front row, and everything she said just made total sense to me. And I was like, wow. And then they dove into the nutrition part of it and how nutrition can drive a lot of these behaviors and why it does that. And it was just really interesting. And she was like, she talked to us after the class, and she's like, I could tell you guys had a very serious thing you were dealing with, because when I would say stuff, I could see it connected.
Wow.
And she was like, I actually have a friend that's going to be doing a nutrition course. Here's the dates. My husband couldn't get out of work, so I went by myself. And when I went, it was the same thing. It was like, oh, dear Lord. And then the thing was, I was sitting there and I was listening to this whole thing, and I was like, wow, I mean, not only does my child need this, I feel like I need this.
Wow.
And she was talking about, the foundation was on the GAPS diet, which is, they changed the name of the book. It's Gut and Physiology Syndrome now, and it's directly correlated with how the gut makes the brain work and all of that kind of stuff, and how the gut's the second brain. And I read the book, and I saw this lecture, and I remember coming home from this lecture and being like, telling my husband, we got to clean everything in this house out. And we didn't eat bad. That was the crazy part. We didn't eat quote unquote bad, right? It was like,
what was your diet then? Like,
I mean, everything was, we didn't ever eat out ever, but every meal was like spaghetti, meat, broccoli. You always had to have a green vegetable there, and I mean, I was like, wow, this is healthy, or
the
chicken pot
food
pie.
Groups, if you will. Yeah,
homemade, but chicken pot pie. Everything was homemade. And then when we were in this class and she started going through all of the ingredient labels and said, look, there's sugar in everything. Like, and then when I remember getting in my cabinet, picking up the Prego. I don't even remember the names of some of these things now. It's been so long, right?
That's old school, yeah.
The Prego tomato sauce, and the like second ingredient is sugar. And I remember picking everything up, sugar, and I was just like, and then like, you know, all of the other chemicals, and they broke all of that down. And so I came home and I was like, we got to do this, and everything. I said, we need to do this gut diet, you know. My husband was like, you are nuts, you know, which we already know, right? But I was like, well, we need to do this. And we basically eradicated everything from our home and started cooking from complete scratch. And when I say complete scratch, I mean everything was complete scratch. And then there was no sugar, no gluten, no grains. Wow. It is an extremely strict diet, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, does everybody need to go that hard? No, but you know, I might be that all or nothing mentality person, which I also realize is unhealthy at this stage in my game. But at the time, I was like, well, this needs to happen. And in the book, it said it takes 12 to 16 months. You can't. Basically, it talks about it being like peeling a scab off, right? If you have severe gut permeability or gut problems, it takes a long time to heal those things. And so I was like, we're doing this for 12 to 16 months. We ended up doing it 16 months. We did not cheat at all. And the lady that did the class was incredibly helpful. Honestly, she'd be a gem for this podcast. Her name is Amy Yardley. She did it because her son has autism. Okay. And she was incredibly helpful because she was like, this is how, as a busy parent, I do this. The Instapot will save your life. This will, you know, and we dove all into that. And I got on the internet and I just started going through how many recipes I could make. And and at the time, I'm no stay-at-home mom. I was working 12-hour days as a dental assistant. I was, you know, we have a farm. Kids in sports, like incredibly busy. And we went on this diet, and I remember that when we first started it, it was awful. You know, I wasn't that bad of a cook, but you don't put stuff out of a
all the stuff out. And,
man.
Yeah. Especially take the sugar out.
Oh, yeah, and I remember we were sitting there at the table, and the chicken was, like, so dry, and it was with, like, a vegetable that I had, I don't know, boiled. I remember it being terrible, right? And everybody's kind of sitting there, and they're like, and I was like, well, it's too bad if you don't like it because this is all we're going to eat, so you better just deal with it. And that's basically the only time we ever had a problem with eating things, and I was creative with school lunches and all that kind of stuff. And pretty soon, it was only a matter of like 2 weeks before my son was like basically normal. All of the crazy stuff went away. And my husband's sitting at the table and he's like, you know what? My wrists don't hurt anymore. My back doesn't hurt anymore.
Inflammation is down.
Oh, yeah. And it was just incredibly wild. And here's the crazy part. At the time, I was almost 200 pounds. And we are active people. Cody knows, we don't slow down for anything. We got a farm. We're going all the time. Horses, you know, like, it's not like I'm living a sedentary lifestyle, but I could not lose weight no matter what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And here I am eating tons of food. This wasn't a diet where you starve. This was, you know, I was making like, I was using honey. I was using like all these natural sugars. We were eating tons of fruit, and I got really good at making all these things. And I ended up going from 197 pounds down to like 119 pounds.
Wow.
In less than 6 months.
Wow.
I had no pain, no inflammation. I wasn't exhausted at the end of the day. My mental health was day and night difference. And I can't say that I've ever had like a severe problem with mental health, but I think especially moms, we tend to be in this stressed out, you know, sympathetic dominant nervous state, you know, and it changed our lives. And we realized that, and that was where this whole journey began, because then it was like, okay, you know, I'm in this rabbit hole and I was learning all these things, and finally I was like, okay, I got to start teaching people this thing. And so it just kind of piled up. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, what are your certifications? Well, honestly, my certifications don't matter at this point, because I've taken so many thousands of hours of continuing education that are not certifications that I don't think I really learned anything in my certifications. I learned a lot of it by having skin in the game and working with tons and tons of people at this point, and so much continuing education with people that are also very valuable in the health space. And it has really helped me see the sides of every facet of health and fitness. And here I am doing all of it.
Wow.
That is
wild.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Was it like a Whole30 diet? Like what were the parameters of it? Is it
It's much more strict
than that?
Yeah.
No grains.
Yeah, no grains, no sugars.
Processed sugars.
Yeah. And it starts in stages. So the first stage is like literally like bone broth, super boiled to death, like meats and some vegetables, and then it kind of picks up speed and you start adding things in, and then it kind of more morphs into like a paleo style diet. And then that's when like the honey comes in and the maple syrup, and you can start doing things like that. So yeah.
So is that so I'm super fascinated because I've been around a little bit of this with regard. So with what you're saying with the gut, is it the same thing as what I've heard, like people talk about leaky gut?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're basically healing the gut through your nutrition protocol.
Yes.
Which then reduces the exposure that's happening to your body by having that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's a whole rabbit hole we could dive down. That would, we could literally cover that for hours, right? But, at the time, I only realized that it was leaky gut, and that was the only key word. And that's a buzzword a lot of people use in the health industry now, right? But there are multiple levels of gut dysfunction.
Sure.
Many of them lead down the path to leaky gut, but you have things like bacterial overgrowths now that are major problems for people, otherwise known, you can have dysbiotic. Yeah, you can have a dysbiotic environment where that means the bacterias are like totally skewed off of each other. Like one will be non-existent, another bad one will be high. Certain parts of that can be called SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is extremely problematic because you eat certain carbohydrates and fibers, and it will actually feed bad bacteria, which causes gases and bloating and a lot of big problems. So there's a type of GI dysfunction, right? And then you've got other things like people that don't have enough stomach acid, so they suffer from severe acid reflux, and then that's a whole nother thing, right? Because it can lead to that dysbiotic environment because you don't have enough acidic environment to actually control the correct bugs. So that's a whole nother talk. So anyway, what I'm saying is there's a lot of different ways to lead to that leaky gut situation, or different dysfunctions that may not be related to leaky gut situation at all, right?
That's one of the possibilities.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so there now I know that, right? I didn't at the time. So it's been an evolution, and it's also been an evolution in working one-on-one with people as long as I have, because now I have seen all of the different things. I basically have had my own. So in a nutshell, we'll get into kind of what I do. So what do I do? Well, I train little old ladies in my basement. I have a small basement studio. That's like the morning gig, right? I have 2 different jobs. And then I do online, basically lab work on people. So people come to me, we run their labs, and we basically have a consulting business going on where I show people their labs, I educate them so that they understand how their thyroid works. They can go to their doctor and be like, yeah, well, my T3, my fuel is low, and this is what's going, so they have an education and they can have an educated discussion with their doctor without their doctor telling them BS, basically.
So my wife right now is going through IHB Integrative Health Practitioner certification to learn to read labs. So my wife's been going through a host of health issues over the last decade or so. She found out probably about 10, 12 years ago that she was allergic to gluten. And so she's big in the naturopathic space. That's where she was going to. She tried Western medicine, didn't quite work for her. Started going to the naturopathic route. And so identified that there was a massive gluten allergy that she had. And so one of the first things that they did is they did a food sensitivity test, and she was allergic to everything. Because at the time, she wanted, her passion was she always wanted to do a fitness competition, right? And so she would start to train, right? And she would start to, really dial in the diet, but she'd get sick every single time, right? And so what she found out with the food sensitivity test was she found out she was allergic to gluten, broccoli, dairy, eggs, almonds,
My goodness.
cucumbers. I mean, the list goes on, and so it's so fascinating to hear you talk because, but then also with that too, over the years of going to both, naturopathic and Western doctors, this whole notion of understanding labs for her own personal experience, it's been a roller coaster. And that was her big motivation and inspiration behind pursuing that, just not only for herself, so that she could best interpret her labs. Because honestly, as you know, going through it yourself, once you start looking at your own data for so long, you get to where you feel like you have a pretty good grasp of what's going on. But then if you can correlate that to the science behind it, so that's where she just actually started. So anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's same sort of similar story where through her own journey, she's like, hey, I want to learn this. And now she's going through that process to be able to understand what that looks like. So that's really cool that you're mentioning that as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things we can say about that alone, right? So I used to do bodybuilding shows. So once I got in, this is the crux of the whole thing, right? Everything I've learned the hard way, and I'm happy to admit that. And I love running that experiment on myself so others don't have to do it.
There you go.
Nice.
But I have done about 5 bodybuilding shows. So when I got in shape and started feeling great after the year of the diet that we did, I started working out. I always liked to work out, but I never had time. I was that busy mom, right? And finally, I remember losing all that weight and looking in the mirror and being like, whew, that's just not what I want it to look like. And in my head, I wanted to look like Pam Anderson running down the beach in Baywatch, And so I thought, I remember at the time I was like big into like Jocko Willink and all that crap.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember looking in the mirror and I was like, you know what? The only person that is going to look the way you want to look, the only person that's going to change that is you. It's not going to be a pill. It's not going to be nothing. And that diet kind of taught me that. It's time to put some muscle on, right? And I was like, how can we do this? I'm already waking up at the butt crack of dawn to be to work at 6 a.m. How do I make this work? Well, not hitting the snooze button was a big part of that, right? And I remember I wrote this stuff on a contract and put it on my front door. I was like, no matter what, I am not going to hit the snooze button. And no matter what, I am going to do at least 3 sets of squats in the morning, 3 sets of 10 squats, 3 sets of 10 push-ups, 3 sets of 10 sit-ups every day, no matter what. And that's easy. I mean, It might be overwhelming to some, but it literally took me like 10 minutes tops. I eliminated the snooze button, started doing this little routine, and then the next thing I know, I got a kettlebell. and now I'm doing deadlifts on top of that. And every day it built and built until I found, oh my gosh, this cracks me up thinking of where I came from, but I found this old Weider Pro bench press on like Facebook Marketplace or something, or probably Craigslist at the time. That was a long time ago. And I remember having my brother and my husband go get it, and my brother was making a joke, enjoy your new coat rack or whatever. And I remember having to start having body part splits because I was like on the internet and I'm like looking at all of these exercises, and I remember I start getting into body part splits, and fast forward a couple months and I'm like getting pretty jacked. Like my husband's probably getting annoyed because I was like, feel my leg, it's got a muscle here, And I remember him being like, yeah, you got a muscle, whatever, and then I remember going, hey, I didn't know how to break it to him, but I was like, I want to do a bodybuilding show. And he was like, you what? like you want to do what? And I was like, I think I can do a bodybuilding show. And this is all training at home with this little bench press leg extension thing. And I can't believe, but the thing about it was I was eating so well. Right. I was eating a lot of actually calories, believe it or not. And my metabolism was running well, and I was working out, and it was amazing how well I could recover and how good my body looked. So anyway, I prepped for my first bodybuilding show. Look great on stage. Then I'm like, oh, my coach is like, you could try for a pro card. And then I was at that point, I was already like in this health mindset where I wanted to be able to share my knowledge and help other people. And I was like, well, I need something that will attract people to me. So being a bodybuilding pro seems like a pretty good street cred, right? So let's do that. Well, bodybuilding is kind of rough on you, And so I trained, and I ended up starting to have a bunch of health problems again.
Hmm.
And I went from feeling like $1 million, looking great, to no matter how much I worked out, my system sounds similar to what you were dealing with your wife. My system was just not responding anymore. And that's when I got into the rabbit holes again, right? And I knew at the time that a lot of the stuff I was doing was wrong, but I was like, whatever, I'll fix it later or I'll figure it out. And then when it came time to figure it out, I was like, oh crap, this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. And then that's when the real lab work thing kind of opened up. But yeah, so I've had experience in a couple places with that kind of stuff, and there's some things to that, because like those food sensitivity tests, for example, if you have any form of leaky gut, many of those aren't accurate, because the foods that you are putting in your system most of the time.
Go, keep going.
You're
Yes,
excited.
I know.
can tell
I
this
know what
right
you're going
here.
to say, because
Yeah.
I've been shouting this for years.
So if you've been eating the same foods,
You're going to become allergic to it.
people get them back and they're like, what? I'm allergic to all these things that I already eat. And it's because if those microvilli within the gut that are meant to meter the things that are going through the system and then put the correct... this is going to date me a little bit, but do you remember the magic school bus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember Mrs. Frizzle driving it through the microvilli? And she's like,
Yeah.
and then the nutrients go into the bloodstream, And I still remember that. And as an adult, I was like, wow, I understand this all now, right? But if you have leaky gut syndrome, and those microvilli have gaps in them, then the foods that you are eating every day, you basically become allergic to, because there are pieces of those foods that are getting into the bloodstream that shouldn't. And then our body is like, oh no, foreign invader, we're now allergic to this. We're not technically allergic, we're sensitive, because our body has now developed a response to that food. So oftentimes if you fix somebody's digestive dysfunction, they rerun those food sensitivity tests and they're not sensitive to those foods that they were originally sensitive to for. Yeah. So that's a little side note on that.
Yeah, I'm so pumped that you said that, because when the first round of food sensitivity tests, everything came out of the diet, right?
Yep.
And then there was a slow introduction,
Yep.
right? A handful of little things here and there. But then fast forward, several years later, you do another test. Oh, those are markers.
Yep.
Okay. So then you would swap out the other things, and then you do another test. Those are the markers. And so for me, and again, my wife probably she'll agree. Like this has been my big thing, is like, literally, if you have a leaky gut, whatever you eat, you're gonna become allergic to it.
Yep.
Like, I'm sure there's instances where maybe that's not the case, but in my experience, from what I've seen, and so that is so fascinating, because yeah, it's not a matter of what the food is and your body's natural physiological response. If that stuff is getting into the place in your body that it's not supposed to be, then it's going to create a problem for most people, right?
Well, and let's take it a step further, and everybody's going to be like, well, how do you fix this? But let's talk
Yeah,
about
that's the next
stress
question.
for a moment.
Ooh.
Yeah.
We can't remove that from our diet frequently.
Yeah.
A lot of people, that's one of their biggest struggles, and it's honestly one of the biggest cruxes of getting healthy in today's
Stress.
society, because
sure.
this is a crazy one because it goes into everything, right? But basically, if you are extremely stressed out, the proper gastric juices are not going to happen. You're going to suppress those. You're going to end up with GI dysfunction more than likely. Motility is slowed, all of these things. There's a great book out there. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. I highly recommend it. You'll be reading it and you'll be like, whoa. Actually, there's like an opening intro in the book where you're like literally sweating because you're listening to this and you're like, wow, what's going on here? But it's a great book.
Wait, so zebras don't get stressed?
No, because a wild animal has the stressor for a moment, and then it goes back to doing whatever the heck it was doing.
Interesting.
Like, it doesn't sit there going, I wonder if a lion is going to show up.
Yeah.
Oh, a lion
not
showed up a
fight
minute
or
ago.
flight all the time.
So maybe I should just be on the lookout, like, not, and that's kind of the point of the book, right? Is that, we are chronically stressed, and a lot of people are chronically stressing over shit that isn't even going to matter in a year. I try to work with my clients. I'm like, is this really going to matter in a year though? Like, what you're stressing about now? And they're like, no. And I was like, well, then why do you care? Like, let it go.
So stress from an internal factor, but also external, like excessive sunlight, excessive physical.
How about
movement.
endurance athletes, strength athletes, bodybuilding, dieting?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of other factors aside from emotional and life factors too, like in chronic dieting cases, bodybuilding competitors, people with eating disorders, their reverse
Ultra
T3
marathoners.
through the roof, because their body's like, well, I need to store this thyroid away. I need it. Like that's an example. Hormone pathways. So, this is where we get into crazy things here, and we could go so many ways with stress, right? Keep in mind that on this podcast, we can't really get into the nitty gritties because we've only got a certain amount of time to sit here, and it would take years to explain it all. So we'll go very surface level and understandable for the listeners. But basically, all of our sex hormones, especially as females, right? And males too, but we'll kind of touch on the female end of things since that's more my place. But all of our sex hormones start with cholesterol. So cholesterol is actually really important. People are afraid of it. That's a whole nother conversation. Everything starts with cholesterol. Then it gets turned into pregnenolone. And then when it gets turned into pregnenolone, it can go one of two ways. It can be turned into progesterone and aldosterone and cortisol. Or it can go down
Stress
this
hormones,
other...
right? Those are the stress hormones.
Progesterone, those part of our reproductive system too. So progesterone signals for the uterine lining to thicken either for embryo implantation or to shed so that then you can begin the cycle over again, which is really important in females. If you don't have a consistent menstrual cycle and you haven't had some kind of medical intervention, that's real bad. Big red flag right there on our health markers, right? But so it can go down into that area where in that pathway literally is pregnenolone, then it goes into progesterone, and then it goes into cortisol. So what happens if we're a female and we're really stressed out? We're stealing all of what we need to run our menstrual cycle correctly, and we're turning it into cortisol. So that's already bad. Super bad. I see so many women, their progesterone's just totally tanked. But then we have the other pathway, and this one is very influential for males as well. I see it. And that pregnenolone can be turned into DHEA, and we're going to skip a couple steps in here for sake of everybody's brains, but that gets turned into DHEA, which DHEA then gets converted into estrogen and testosterone. So you stressed out guys, if you are crashing your DHEA because you're making cortisol, you're going to have low testosterone.
Which leads to more belly fat, which means you can't
Lots
stay fit.
of problems. And in females too. So this is a whole other thing. Testosterone in females, also important. If we are taking away from our DHEA via taking away from pregnenolone and putting it all over into cortisol, we are actually taking away from testosterone. Testosterone also aromatizes into estrogen. That's why male bodybuilders get gynecomastia because they're using large loads of testosterone. Then they end up getting breast tissue because that converts into estrogen.
Right.
Same thing for females. Obviously, there are other pathways involved, but we also need that. It's an important hormone for females as well. So in a nutshell, stress is stealing your reproductive hormones, and there are lots of things that contribute to that, which we could dive into, like we touched on a few of them. Blue light is terrible.
Terrible. Yeah.
Terrible. Because it is actually a stressor that we don't even know about. And it's like, well, how the heck do you get away from that? Well, you don't. I mean, you can't, especially in today's society, everything's LED, and that's a crazy thing. The thing I want to convey here before we go any further is you can't be afraid of everything.
Right.
And so we need to make sure that we are understanding that instead of being afraid and adding to that stress load of all these crazy things that could impact our health, treat our system like a bucket. Control the things that you can control. And I think that's something that people forget when they're trying to dive into a health journey. They're like, oh my God, I can't eat this because it's processed in a factory with this and that and oh my gosh, I can't go in there because it's got blue light, and I can't look at a screen all day, and I can't, you see where I'm going with this. It can just can turn into a major stressor for a lot of people in and of itself.
That is so fascinating, and yeah, you're right. I mean, we could talk for days about this topic. One of the things I wanted to say, and it's actually a a subject that we bring up quite a bit too, and what I'm hearing you talk about as well is, so we're big believers in preventative health, right? And with preventative health, you have to have a focus in on root cause of issues, right? And so when I hear you talk, it's so fascinating because everything that you're talking about, and thank you so much for breaking that down for our listeners too, and for our watcher, is because like breaking down like how these pathways initiate and what the steps and stages are. But when I hear you talk is like I listen then to what we see so much in our society and our culture is so many potential solutions or treatments to the bottom of the end of the process of where you just talked about, not the root cause of that, right?
It blows my mind how incredibly complex this all is, and it's kind of overwhelming. Like I sit here and think about, how does it apply to me, or listeners, how does it apply to them?
Yeah.
So on the idea of preventative health, where do you start? If someone comes to you and they're coming to you because they have a symptom that they're trying to treat, whether it's I'm stressed out all the time, I have major GI issues. Where's the starting point? Is it with labs? Is it sitting down and like really analyzing your diet? Because everybody is different, and even though we function in similar ways.
Well, so what I have learned is that most people have zero understanding of anything around them when it comes to health. That is nutrition, that is lifestyle factors. So that's actually a really hard question to answer, and part of why I started doing what I do, because I realized I couldn't just be a personal trainer, because if they weren't doing the other things like sleeping and having their mind right and having their nutrition right, and maybe I could even be making it worse by adding stress to Karen, who has 16 kids and can't pay her bill. I could potentially be making it worse by adding that stressor. That's when I realized all this stuff goes together. So when people are like, what do you do? I'm like, well, I kind of do everything at this point, even right down to the mental. How do we handle these things? Like, I've got a client that's going through some stuff, and it's actually her partner that's going through some stuff, and he's getting the help he needs. But I was like, you realize that you're going to need to find yourself after dealing with all this stuff too, right? And we had to have a good talk about that, because I was like, you've been living in a parasympathetic state for so long. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of EMDR, where they teach you how to deal with PTSD. But basically they're getting you to look at your full 180 degrees of peripheral vision, right? So we naturally can see 180 degrees. Is a whole nother rabbit hole we just dove me into here. But with her, I was like, I'm guessing when you're looking around, you're looking right in front of you. You're so in that sympathetic dominant state. You're just looking right there instead of taking a break and looking around you. And she was like, I am. And I realized that, and I was like, so remember that. So there's a lot of like, you've got to consider everything when it comes to somebody's health. So to circle back to your question, it depends on what the person's resources is. I will say this. Most people have more access to an understanding of what's going on with their body than they really realize. And by that, I mean, by the time they've gone in and paid copays and dealt with having a chronic illness or just having some kind of dysfunction for a period of time, whether that's hormonal, GI distress, whatever it may be, they probably spent enough time and energy to just go buy a $97 lab panel and have somebody look at it. So they're busy saying, oh, my insurance won't pay for that, when they've probably in the last month racked up $20 copays for a month, and that would have paid for their labs. So thinking of the big picture is really important, and I was kind of thinking that on the way over here. So honestly, it's a tough one, because they can do those labs, but then what are they going to say? They're going to say they're within normal limits. There might be a couple things flagged that may not even matter, like cholesterol. And we can kind of dive into some of this. There may be some things that don't even matter, and that they're not going to get the big picture by just looking at their own. They need somebody to guide them through that.
Right. Because there's a gazillion different labs that you can take too.
Yes. And that's one of those ones where I'm like, well, let's get the ones that are really heavy hitters. Like if somebody's financially got issues, I know on my website, I'm like, well, this is what I would suggest, but here is an option if you don't have a lot of financial availability, right? people will go in and get that lower one, and then we'll run all that, and we'll be like, okay, well, let's do this. Let's make these changes. If we need to run the bigger one, we will, and that might fill in some of the pieces, but let's just make some minimal changes. There are so many resources on the internet now. Not all of them are great, and that's there's so many rabbit holes you can get into with health, and that's what always makes it difficult on these podcasts, right? Because somebody's going to tell you to be a vegan, somebody's going to tell you,
Right.
I think
I have the magic bullet.
I think ultimately trying to go back to your roots a little bit, like eating real things, making sure your sleep is good. These are like basic things. Like there's no magic with them, right? Making sure your sleep is good, making sure you're getting outside, making sure you're moving your body, ultimately is going to be the ultimate health hack.
Isn't that the same thing that Dr. Cody was talking about? It literally, fundamentally, almost the
Diet and
same.
exercise.
It's the same talk track here. Which, like, guys, it's not as complicated as sometimes we can make it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the fundamentals of eating right, exercising, getting good sleep, like those go a long way in your overall health and wellness.
Well, and eating right. Eating right
thing
is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I had a client the other day, God love her. She was like, I took my macros that you gave me and my food list and I put it in ChatGPT and I just told it to tell me what to eat for dinner. And it made me a perfect meal because I went on her meal plan because I could
hamburger and fries.
I could see no, it was perfect. I went on and I was like, because I can review what they've done for the day. And I was like, this is awesome. Gold
Textbook.
star.
Textbook, yeah.
And she was like, yeah, I use ChatGPT. I was like, I don't care what you did. Like, you clearly went on there. You understood the assignment. You were like, well, I don't know how to do this, so I will just figure it out. So there are the AI is pretty crazy, and it's not always right, but I will say it takes information that's not...
It aggregates it.
Yeah, it's taking a big picture approach, kind of like we talked about with our health, right? It's not just going off Google, who gets paid to say a lot of things, so I would say that we have a lot more tools available to us. If we were like, make me a well-balanced, high-protein, whole foods meal, I bet you it will tell you exactly what you need. So that's a pretty free resource for people right there. Do that for your food. Move every day. I don't want to say get 10,000 steps in, but move every day. Try to keep your stress bucket low. Get some sunlight. You're going to be golden, right?
So the diet thing I like to zero in on because there's the saying, eat healthy, eat and you'll be fine. And like,
what is
does
healthy?
that mean I just eat salads all the time?
Yeah.
Does that mean I do the Jordan Peterson thing and just eat steak?
Yeah.
Like carnivore diet, you
Yeah.
know, paleo, like what? I know every body type is different, but how do you figure out which food path to go? Like Dr. Cody was more on the proponent of fruits and vegetables and we're naturally vegetarian and having some meat, but it's not like a huge thing as in the other way, which is the carnivore diet. Like, where do you sit? Like,
I sit, what does the person need? And that's where sometimes that's a trial and error for a lot of people. But the big mistake I'm seeing right now is, so people have going back to the GI stuff, they have severely dysbiotic GI environments, meaning the bacteria is all kinds of whacked out due to antibiotics and nutrition and stress and all those things, right? So they have these crazy dysbiotic environments. What do? They go on the carnivore diet and they're like, I feel so good. Well, you killed off all that bacteria that was causing problems. But because you removed all of its food source for the most part, right? But then you bring back anything and you're like, I feel like crap. They're like, I don't eat that because I didn't realize how crappy it made me feel. Well, it probably didn't. It probably wasn't that broccoli that made you feel crappy, but now you've been on the carnivore diet for so long, you have killed the actual microbes that help you process that broccoli. You went a little bit too far, right?
fascinating.
And that's a big thing I'm seeing now with keto and carnivore and low FODMAP diets and all that kind of stuff. People push it too far. Those are meant to be an elimination diet, and then you've got to bring that stuff back in. On all of them. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. So basically you have to find that, again, we're at that bucket stage, right? So try something. I don't care what diet it is, try it out. Not the McDonald's diet, I hope. But try out some whole foods diet. Maybe it's, but do it as an elimination diet to be like, oh, do I actually have a problem? Or were you eating a ton of junk food? You went carnivore And then guess what? You felt great because you removed all those inflammatory foods, but then actually you did tolerate the other things, but you didn't have them in. So then you killed off all your bacteria and you tried to bring something in, and it doesn't work out because now you don't even have the stuff you needed to process stuff. So there's a couple sides to that, right? And then back to the protein thing. So I actually just got back from Las Vegas. I was at a big conference down there where there was 250 of the smartest coaches in the industry, basically. And I was fortunate enough to go, and there was a cancer doctor down there, and he's doing a lot of the most groundbreaking cancer research. And he said the one thing that stands out among all cancer patients and cases and prevention is the amount of muscle tissue people are carrying on their body. Because
skeletal muscle mass?
Yes, because our lymphatic system is in our muscle systems. And when we are contracting and expanding our muscle systems, we are clearing our lymphatic system, which then allows to break down that cell replication that turns into cancer, basically in a nutshell.
Wow.
Yeah, well, what grows muscle? Protein. So, like it or not, people that are pushing towards this more vegan diet, there is a phase where you cannot get enough muscle on. And the reason for that is because many of the plant-based proteins are not complete protein sources. So you'll notice when you get a plant-based protein powder, it has like rice protein, peanut protein. Pea protein.
Pea protein. Yep.
You know, it has all of these different pumpkin seed, hemp seed. And you're like, well, why does it have to have all this stuff? Why can't it just be peas or just be rice? It's because these are all constructed of different amino acids. That's what proteins are. Mm-hmm. And a good way to describe this is if you're trying to build 3 cars and you only have 2 steering wheels, that other car has to go to the junkyard. You cannot build, like, that car could be totally ready to go, but you don't have a steering wheel, you're not using it. That's something our kidneys have to deal with. That's a whole nother conversation. But there are very few plant-based complexes that have a complete protein source. So it becomes a very scientific thing to get enough protein in based on plant-based sources.
Interesting.
And most people are not eating enough variety in their plant-based sources when they are vegan to actually benefit from the proteins that are in the things that they're eating. So one good example of this is people will be like, oh, there's 8 grams of protein in peanut butter. You can't use any of that unless you pair it with something else that has those. Usually lysine and tryptophan are the missing components on a lot of plant-based
That's why
fibers.
Protein powders typically have a
multiple
mix of different types. Interesting.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm not real into the plant-based protein realm, but because it gets too complex, and I'm usually like, I know people that are better at this, so you go over here. But I do believe that hemp is a complete protein. That might be the only one that's a complete protein. But it basically becomes a science, right? So you have to be like, well, I had this spinach that had protein, and I had this that had protein, and they're missing this and that, and you become a chemist. And most of us can't even handle day-to-day life, so becoming a plant chemist is just seems like a horrible idea
realistic.
to me.
A little too much.
Yeah. So can it be done? Yes. Maybe some people do respond well to that, but I find a lot of people when the key of the vegan diet is the nutritional diversity, which is what we're missing. And that's why we're ending up with a lot of these microbiome issues also, is because we don't have the diversity. We're not eating the micronutrients that we need and the prebiotics that we need. Everybody's focused on probiotics. Well, what feeds the probiotics? The prebiotics do. So we need to be eating a variety, which is huge. So if you do that elimination diet, short period of time, start pulling things back in slowly, because you've got to feed your microbiome the right stuff to feed the bacteria that keep the balance right, or you're just going to end up back into the same place you are. So that looks like being as weird as you can with your fruits and vegetables, which is funny, right? Because it's easy to get stuck on the easy things: apples, bananas, spinach, oranges, broccoli. Bodybuilders have horrible guts. Why? They eat the same vegetables all the time. Pulling in weird things doesn't have to be a lot either. Like, if you figure what our microbiome is, you can put a couple leaves of fennel in something, or throw fresh cilantro, fresh basil, fresh parsley in, little bits of fresh garlic, ginger. These don't have to be large amounts of things, just fresh. And rotating constantly.
Interesting.
Because we need that for our microbiome diversity.
My wife's doctor just recommended to her, she said she wanted her to put herbs in everything.
Yeah.
Just a completely, however, whatever wherever, whenever, just incorporate herbs and everything.
Yeah, cilantro has been one of my go-tos lately. I love fennel, but so a way I've been doing it with my clients, and this is a great thing for how can everybody start to get healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go to the store and like say it's just you living at home. If you got a wife, you got to buy 2 vegetables. If it's you got 3 people, you're going to have to buy 3, but 7 different fruits and 7 different vegetables for the week, and just have one of them every day.
Fascinating.
It's not that hard, right? It takes the science out of it. Like, you really don't even have to think that hard. You go in, you have your cart, you're like, I'm going to have an apple, I'm an orange, I got an apple and orange, now I need a banana, there's a piece of watermelon, there's a cherry. Oh, what's this? This is a mango? Weird mango? Cool. Get into that different, and then that might look like, oh, a bell pepper. What the heck is a jicama? Okay, let's try, There are some weird things out there. There is something called celeriac root. It looks the ugliest veggie on the planet. It's delicious. I never would have discovered that if I didn't go in and go, okay, what's weird today? Getting as diverse as you possibly can, I think is really important. And I think you get back into the protein crux because people's digestion is so whacked out these days that they can't digest it well, and then it ends up causing inflammation and problems because they're not digesting it properly. So I think if you get optimized, though, you're going to find that the protein thing's probably going to be more helpful for you in maintaining muscle mass, which is really the secret to longevity in so many aspects.
Right. That's actually interesting because over the past year, I've actually had a slight decrease in muscle mass and had about the same amount of activity and things like that. And so, for someone like me, where would I start?
Well, let's
start with a blood
be
panel?
honest.
Like, what do you
You're
do?
like a cycling animal, Cody.
Yeah.
Like, you more than likely aren't even getting enough calories in while you're training, to be quite honest with you. Like,
Interesting.
it is probably an energy expenditure thing more for you. Obviously, it takes us a lot of diving into to figure those things out, right? But Cody may not have mentioned it on this podcast, but he is like the Forrest Gump of the bicycle world. And he just is like, oh, I just rode like 500 miles on my hard body freaking bicycle. But, it's probably a lot of it's an energy expenditure thing. Also, a stress standpoint, you're more than likely tapping into a more gluconeogenic state when you're training if you're running out of calories. So gluconeogenesis, for people that don't know, is when we turn our own protein, which would be our skeletal muscle mass, into glucose to use for energy, because glucose is our energy source, right? So it could be something like that. Like, there's a lot of things that it could be. It could be a decline in testosterone. It could be many things, right? But for you, I would just make the assumption that probably it comes to an energy expenditure thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to talk about before moving on to some multi-pathway activation conversations is, so on SIBO and leaky gut syndrome. How do you discover someone has that? Like, is it from a stool sample? Like, how? Like, what is the?
Okay, so this is where I feel the functional medicine space is equally as guilty as the Western medicine space. I'm just gonna say that. Probably get some haters for it, but now it has become, oh, we're going to fix your root cause. Here's a $10,000 protocol and another $1,000 worth of labs, and we're going to get you figured out and stress you out in the process because now you can't do this, and we see all this and that. I think the best thing to do is probably an elimination diet and see what symptoms you have. Side profile pictures are massive in this. Like, if you take a picture in the morning, first thing in the morning, fasted, like obviously no shirt off or a sports bra on, see what your side profile is. I tell it people, any digestive issue that you notice is more than likely not a good one, because we shouldn't notice our digestion. So burping, bloating, gas, loose stools, not going to the bathroom every day, those are all some huge red flags. From a SIBO aspect, most people have either diarrhea or constipation, but extreme bloating due to the gases. So they'll notice that they'll eat usually it's a carbohydrate that sets it off, but they'll be like I ask in my onboarding questionnaires, I'm like, how do you feel you react to carbs and why? And a lot of people are like, they bloat the heck out of me. And I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. Because many of the fibers that are in the foods that you're eating that may be the offensive food are ones that cause that gas. So because of the bacteria, the bad bacteria eating it, So anyway, there are other ways though that you can sneak in looking into this that are pretty affordable. So you can get crazy. You can do something called a GI map, which is they're about $500, I want to say, and they're poop tests or stool tests.
Right.
And they even get into like the genetics of stuff and whatnot. I'm not licensed in GI maps because not enough people are willing to pay $500 and then pay me on top of it. And I feel you can do a lot of the basics first, I guess is where I'm hammering on this. Do a lot of the basics first, and then if you're still continuing to have a problem after you've done some of the basics, then maybe it's time to pursue some deeper investigation. So don't start with a GI map. I mean, if you have the financial means and you want to, by all means do. It's kind of fun to look at. I love that kind of stuff. But you can look at a regular CBC and CMP as well. This is not 100% because there are other things that can be involved, right? But if you go to your CBC, which is your complete blood count, you'll look at your white blood cell count. Anything less than 5 or greater than 8 is a sign that you're dealing with a low-grade infection of some type. So what would that be? We don't know. Maybe it could be gastric. Who knows? Then you go down to your neutrophil and lymphocyte percentage. Any neutrophils over 60% is the sign that you have a low-grade bacterial infection. Oh, SIBO is bacteria. Wait a minute. I mean, it could be a bacterial infection of another kind. I've had that happen too, but SIBO and bacterial overgrowth in people is actually pretty common these days, especially with antibiotics. So if somebody has neutrophils over 60, it's like, oh, we need to figure this out here. Or watch it. A CBC and a CMP is like $25 if you don't order it through your regular doctor. They charge $300. But you can get them for like $25 on the internet. You can check it and make sure it's not just, oops, I picked up some bacteria while I was on the airplane, or is this something I've been chronically dealing with? So if I see somebody with neutrophils that are hovering just over 60, like 65, 63, they have some GI stuff. Typically, I'm like, let's clean up your diet a little bit, see how you respond. Let's rerun this in 8 weeks and see if your neutrophils are still elevated.
Fascinating.
If they are, it's like, oh, this is a chronic thing potentially because guess what? You're still elevated. The next thing would be lymphocytes, and I'm just throwing this in here. It's not really GI related, but anything over 40 is a sign that you could be dealing with something viral. The reason I brought up the neutrophil thing and I said could be a SIBO thing, there's a lot of other things. So I actually had a pretty crazy case a couple years ago where it ended up being Lyme disease in the client.
No kidding.
And luckily I had been watching his patterns with this for a long time, and I was working with his doctor directly. At the time I had a doctor I was working with for a lot of cases, and then she sent him to the oncologist actually because he had platelet problems and all this kind of stuff. Nobody could figure it out. The oncologist is like, oh, it's fine.
It's super hard to diagnose, right?
Yeah, well, all of a sudden, one day his neutrophils went from cruising just over 60, like 65 or 70-ish, to being up over 100 for no reason. And I was like, maybe you should see if she can run you for Lyme disease. Because he had all these other symptomology too. And sure enough, they checked him and he came up positive for Babesia. And I was like, oh, okay. Wow. This guy it literally was laying dormant, like it was there. It wasn't full bore because I guess Lyme disease will just sit there dormant, like hanging out and wait for an opportunity to strike. And apparently he got run down and it was just like, bam, here I am. And yeah, it was a wild thing. But because we had been watching it for a period of time, we were able to go, okay, well, what is going on here? And he had addressed nutrition and done all these things. And so it was like, why is this still happening? Well, we were able to figure it out. So anyway.
Okay. So stepping back, I think start with some kind of an elimination diet.
Yep.
The side profile picture.
Yep.
See how, you progress. If
Yep.
that doesn't work, getting a gut map done would be awesome, but expensive.
Yep.
But the other is to do a CBC
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of see where your baseline
Where your
blood level
neutrophils are at. Yeah.
and then go from there. Okay.
Yeah. And oftentimes an elimination diet in a case of SIBO. So to dive into this just a little bit further to kind of answer your question better for the listeners, if you have been on antibiotics frequently, that is many of those people get SIBO.
Yeah,
Another
makes sense.
scenario is high stress. So when we don't have the proper acidity in our stomach to control the bacterial balance, we have a tendency for those bad guys to grow beyond where they should. And then when that happens, you get a dysbiotic GI environment, which is the bacteria are not where they should be. And so it may not necessarily be SIBO, but it's bacterial problems of some kind. And then that's when you start to get all the gas and stuff. So oftentimes that is something else that needs to be addressed on top of diet. But yes, an elimination diet, a low FODMAP diet is an excellent elimination diet because it doesn't remove all of the fiber. There's tons of resources for low FODMAP diet. So for $7.99, you can download the Monesh app. I don't get any money for this, by the way. I'm just speaking. It's the best app for that because it literally tells you every fruit and veggie and whether it's like red, green, or orange. And so you can look at that and be like, oh, okay, that's red. I should not touch that right now. And kind of take your nutrition down to more of the easy to digest stuff that doesn't have those fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, and polyols in them. That's what FODMAP stands for.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
you explain what FODMAP,
Yeah.
a low FODMAP
Those are the
diet.
things that the bugs like to eat and party with. So, so if you take those down and you remove those, then oftentimes, and you see a change, then you know that you've been dealing with a bacterial overgrowth. And another thing is probiotics. Everybody and their brother wants to be on probiotics, but if you have a dysbiotic GI environment and you go on probiotics,
Make it
you're
worse.
potentially making that worse. So if you're taking probiotics, you're having GI dysfunction, remove those too and see. And then maybe bring them back in and see. And then maybe bring back in some FODMAPs and see.
Interesting.
It's like a big lab experiment, right? But you can get down to the bottom of it on your own. But make sure that you give it time also. Because it takes sometimes, 5 to 8 days to get some of these things out of your system. So if you do something for a week and you're like, oh, I'm not feeling any better. I will tell you I did a stint. I had severe SIBO myself when I got done with my last set of bodybuilding shows. It was ugly because I had a 6-pack of abs, but I looked like I was 9 months pregnant.
Wow.
It was wild. But I remember I was like, I'm going to do carnivore. I got nothing else to lose. Went on carnivore. I remember within like a week, I was waking up with a flat stomach. So you will know pretty quickly what's blowing you up if you just do a little bit of trial and error. But the thing is keep it basic. Don't be like, oh, I'm going to bring this in today, and it's a McDonald's cheeseburger. You don't even know what ingredient that was, right?
Yeah.
You just be like, I picked 3 things today. Today I'm going to bring in 3 offensive foods for the next week. That's what I'm going to do. See if you blow up. If you blow up, you're going to know it's one of those 3 things. Try not to have so much crazy variety that you can't identify what is actually causing the problem, too.
Fascinating. It's mind-boggling how it's all connected.
Yeah.
And speaking on that, we want to know, everybody who comes on this show, if they know what multi-pathway activation is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what that is, or can you describe it?
I think that's a little bit of what we talked about earlier, where I was like, when I became a personal trainer, that was my first cert, right? I realized that this is all one big thing. It is not just sleep, it's not just nutrition, it's not just stress, it's not just exercise. It is everything we are exposed to. And that's why it's so important to treat it all like a bucket. Like, what are we putting in this bucket? Are we putting in stress, lack of sleep, bad food? Okay, well,
Blue light.
yeah, blue light. We can't control all that, right? Okay, well, what can we not put in the bucket? Well, we know that nutrition, we could probably figure that out, right? Okay, so let's take that out of the bucket. Bucket's less full now. It's not overflowing. We're now getting somewhere, Oh, I think I can put on some blue light glasses when I'm working tonight. Okay, we just took a little bit more out of the bucket. Oh, I can set a boundary. Man, people got a problem with that. I can set a boundary and take some stress off my plate. Oh, it wasn't all the stress. We still got to get the kids to school. We still got to pay for our house. We still got life stress. Our uncle's making us mad, whatever. Mm-hmm. But we just took one stressor out. And it's like a leaky faucet, right? The more leak, the faster the bucket's going to fill. Mm-hmm. If we turn that down a little and it's just dropping, we are going to be so much further ahead.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's great. I think that kind of just to tie that into one of the things we said earlier too, is with that bucket metaphor, inherently what I've seen, just in my own personal experience, is that once somebody hits that point to where they really get sick, instinctively every human being goes to the last thing that they put in their bucket. And they said, that must have been the thing that did this, right? Yeah. Whether that's, I spent, 8 hours on my computer because I was cramming for this thing for work and I just got to really de-stress from work. Like, that's only one part of it. Or it's like, what did I eat last night? Or what, so it's so interesting because, again, it's a matter of all of these things are one variable in the equation, Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think that that's it's been super awesome to have you come on, Connie. I really appreciate your time. I think that it's been super insightful to not only myself, I know for Cody, but hopefully for the listeners as well. There's a lot of information here. And just like I said earlier, I think I speak for all of us to say that, it's just another testament to the fact of reach out to the resources that people have available in their communities and the people that are studying this stuff, learning these things, providing these resources for people. For you, Connie, though, for people that, whether they want to connect with you or find out, where can they find you and where could they connect with you?
I mean, my website's probably best, which is the www.connienightingale.com. Nightingale spelled like the bird. I do have an Instagram. I don't really do a lot of informational stuff on there. I'm so bad with the internet these days because people will tell ChatGPT to write them a post and then they'll act like they all know everything about it. And it's like, no, there's a lot of nuance here. So I post a lot of heavy lifting on Instagram, but you can DM me and reach out if you have questions and I can point you in the right way. I mean, my ultimate goal in life is to help people get healthier. That probably comes at detriment to my financial success, right? But I literally answer thousands of questions about people's health and point them in the right direction. And I'm happy to do that if people want to reach out to me at Connie Begani on Instagram. I'm available. And yeah, that's pretty much YouTube. I have the Fit Farming Food Mom YouTube. That's pretty healthy, although I haven't posted a lot on there. That's a whole long story in itself lately. But there are a ton of podcasts and stuff on there that I've recorded with other people and lots of knowledge there. So yeah, that's pretty much how you get in touch with me.
Well, we're lucky to have you today.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah.